Puis-je vous demander de vous asseoir? May I ask you to get to your seats? À tout à l'heure. I know it is a bit like a first school day. Hein? La rentrée scolaire. So if I may ask you to get to your seats. Voilà, voilà, voilà. Il est logique qu'on attrape un tout petit peu de retard puisque c'est la première journée, donc, mais quand même, et les collègues des Pays-Bas, évidemment, notre cher président du Congrès, Yevheniia. Voilà, voilà, voilà. Monsieur le secrétaire général adjoint. Voilà, ça, c'est gai, ça commence à... Il y a la voile qui se met. Bon, mesdames et messieurs, chers collègues, je vous souhaite toutes et tous la bienvenue ici à Strasbourg et tous vous autres qui sont branchés par Internet. Le soleil est là. Nous avons, comme toujours, une excellente coopération avec les autorités françaises qui m'ont quand même demandé d'encore une fois vous dire que dans les bâtiments, il faut quand même garder le masque, s'il vous plaît, au-dessus du nez, parce que je sais qu'il y a une gentille dame à ma gauche où il y a toujours, ça fait toujours un tout petit peu. Donc, merci de bien vouloir respecter les règles sanitaires. Je sais qu'on les a mis en place un peu de façon sévère, mais je trouve que mieux d'être prudent que par après de devoir être un peu embêté, quoi. Donc merci de respecter les règles sanitaires et encore merci aux autorités françaises pour leur excellente collaboration. En principe, vous tous, vous êtes testés, donc ça donne quand même un peu d'aisance. Néanmoins, respectez-le. Je dois vous dire que cette semaine va être une semaine de séance plénière. C'est un peu rentrée scolaire à la limite parce qu'on sort tout doucement du Covid. Mais nous avons évidemment des débats importants. Des débats importants où on est bien conscient, j'espère nous toutes et tous, que ça pouvait ou ça pourrait donner lieu à quelques débats chauds, je dois dire. Et il n'y a rien de mauvais à ça. Mais je voudrais quand même d'emblée vous demander, un peu comme on est dans l'atmosphère du championnat européen de foot, quand on joue, il faut respecter les règles. Et donc, quand l'arbitre siffle, que ce soit moi, le vice-président ou la vice-présidente, quand il siffle ou quand elle siffle, ben voilà. Donc, respecter les règles, être respectueux les uns envers les autres. Je voudrais quand même vous envoyer ce petit message au début de cette séance, puisque nous savons qu'il y a des sujets importants à débattre et qui ont déjà donné lieu à certains commentaires en dehors de notre Assemblée. Et je voudrais au début quand même très clairement dire que cette Assemblée est indépendante. Nous avons le droit d'avoir notre opinion. Vous tous et toutes en dehors, vous avez droit à votre opinion. Mais c'est l'Assemblée, en toute indépendance, influencée ou pas par des opinions, il n'y a rien de mal à ça, qui va former son idée. Donc je voudrais quand même dire ça très clairement au début, puisque en adoptant des règles et en suivant les valeurs qui sont les nôtres, c'est le plus important qui nous guide vers le futur, parce qu'aujourd'hui, ce n'est que le prologue pour demain. Et donc tout ceci va se gérer sous cette Convention européenne des droits humains et libertés fondamentales. Je voudrais essayer, utiliser, si vous me permettez, Madame la Secrétaire Générale, je voudrais essayer cette image d'un grand parapluie au-dessus de l'Europe, des 47, qui est censé nous protéger contre une pluie acide qui veut porter atteinte à nos valeurs, à nos libertés quand même. Et il faut être honnête, nous tous, entre nous, que oui, il est vrai que nous devons travailler davantage, beaucoup plus pour protéger nos valeurs, nos principes. Et ça, c'est la tâche, c'est la responsabilité, c'est le devoir de l'institution dans son entièreté. Et comme vous êtes le parleur de l'institution, en quelque sorte, le parleur politique, c'est notre devoir à nous toutes et tous d'assumer que ce parapluie nous protège effectivement quand même de temps à autre contre peut-être une pluie acide. Et donc ce parapluie, pour moi, c'est la Convention des droits humains et des libertés fondamentales. Which brings me to this small artifact, if you allow me to do so. Welcome obviously, our Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, I don't know, is that the right title, Björn? Yeah, the Deputy, not Assistant Deputy, sorry about that. The President of the Congress, obviously our own Secretary General, who manages to make sure that everything works well with all of our team. But it brings me to this small artifact, I don't know whether you can put it a bit on the screen, which is a bell. Now, some of you know already, but many of you don't. This is the bell of freedom. At least this is how I baptize it at this instance. And dear colleagues, this is the bell that has been used 70 years ago by the first elected president of this assembly to open the very first sitting of this plenum. So 70 years ago, this bell was in the hands of Paul-Henri Spaak, first president-elect of the Assembly, to open the session. And now you would say, okay, that's nice. Well, this bell only came back to Strasbourg a couple of days ago. Because the very first Europe House that was opened in Europe was in Germany, Bad Marienberg. Andreas Nick is there. He's guilty of this, well, at least in part. But 70 years ago, the very first Europe House was opened in Bad Marienberg, and Paul-Henri Spaak was there. And he opened that first Europe House, by the way, Europe House which is close to your heart, Madam Secretary General, because you were the boss of the Europe House in Zagreb. This is how you started your career within the context of the Council of Europe. And in his speech, he indeed mentioned that he would leave this bell as a symbol of the European Convention of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms in this very first Europe House, where we now have more than 100 throughout Europe. And as it goes, there was a gentleman, Mr. Krempel, Herr Krempel, who was there at that very opening. And after a couple of years, when it went from left to right, this bell, who took it with him home, because no one was interested in it, and he kept it with him. He basically protected it. And as it goes, Andreas told me about it, that Mr. Krempel, who is now 90 years old, would like to return it to Strasbourg, come back home. And as my wife always says in French, il n'y a pas de hasard dans la vie, there's no coincidence in life. Some way, I've got this feeling that this bell organized itself, that it needed to come back because you've got this acid rain out there. This is how I feel it. And so I believe that this bell coming back, thanks to Mr. Krempel and thanks to Dr. Nick, coming back after 70 years, is a priceless artifact symbolizing what we all should be doing more today than yesterday, protecting, upholding, developing human rights, fundamental freedoms, democracy and rule of law. And so I judge this artifact as being extremely important symbolically. I'm a bit wary of touching it because it was used by a great statesman, one of the founding fathers of the Council of Europe, Belgium, by the way, so it makes it a little bit even more touchy as far as I'm concerned. But I do believe that this is the symbol that should remind each of us every day again that this is why we are here. We are here because we are the sole institution that has the responsibility and the duty to protect more than 840 million citizens in 47 countries with regard to their rights and their freedoms. So therefore, if you allow me, quite symbolically, restarting after COVID, and if you wish, starting slowly again after COVID, I will, Madam Secretary General, if you allow me, quite symbolically open this first session as Paul-Henri Spaak did 70 years ago. Session is open. And now it went into the plexi thing, and whoever dares to touch it, I've got 5 of my greffiers around here who will protect it with their life. Well, plus ou moins. Hein? Voilà. Ça reste là. Voilà, dear colleagues. The first item, as you know, I will conduct the meeting in English in order to make life of our translators easier. First item on the agenda is the examination of credentials of new members. The names of the representatives and substitutes are in document 15320. If no credentials are challenged, the credentials will be ratified. Are any credentials challenged? If so, please ask for the floor. I don't see any. The credentials are ratified, and I welcome all of our new colleagues. We come then to the election of vice presidents of the Assembly in respect of Italy and the Netherlands. One more reason why I'm happy to have our president of the Congress here with us, who is from the Netherlands. A good team, by the way. Yeah, you know, you'll hear me speaking about football a lot this week, because my team, by the way, is playing tonight against Finland. Sorry about that, Finland. Well, I have to be careful, though. So the next item on the agenda is the election of vice presidents of the Assembly in respect of Italy and the Netherlands. The 2 candidates are from the Italian delegation, Ms. Marta Grande, and from the Netherlands delegation, mevrouw Ria Oomen-Ruijten. I think that Ria is in the room also. If there is no request for a vote, Ms. Grande and mevrouw Oomen-Ruijten will be declared elected. Is there such a request? I don't see any. Therefore, I declare both candidates elected as vice presidents of the Assembly, and I congratulate them on their election. And by the way, I'll tell them immediately that I have myself replaced very often as president of the Assembly by a vice president, and so I will also call on both of you to assist in the good functioning of our Assembly. Then we come to the changes in the membership of committees. Our next business is to consider these changes proposed in the membership of committees. They are set out in document commissions 2021-06 and add 1. Are the proposed changes in the membership of the Assembly's committees agreed to? I don't see anyone asking for the floor, so they are. Thank you for that. Now, before we examine the draft agenda, the Assembly needs to consider requests for current affairs debates. Now, the Bureau has received the following request. 1 is a request for a current affairs debate on the need for an effective solidarity mechanism between European countries to relieve migratory pressure on frontline countries, which is requested by the Migration Committee, and a second request for a current affairs debate on the situation in Belarus, a threat to the whole of Europe, requested by Mr. Zingeris and 19 members of the Assembly. The second of these debates was transferred from a request for an urgent procedure debate to a request for a current affairs debate. On Friday, the Bureau agreed to the 2 current affairs debates. We will now consider each request for a current affairs debate individually. So, the first request for current affairs debate is the need for an effective solidarity mechanism between European countries to relieve migratory pressure on frontline countries. As I said, at its meeting on Friday, the Bureau approved this request and therefore recommends to the Assembly that the matter be debated during this part session. Does the Assembly agree to this recommendation? It does. The Bureau's recommendation is therefore accepted, and the request for a current affairs debate is approved. The debate will be opened by Mr. Pierre-Alain Frides. Then we come to a request for a current affairs debate on the situation in Belarus, a threat to the whole of Europe. At its meeting again on Friday, the Bureau approved this request and therefore recommends to the Assembly that the matter be debated during this part session. Does the Assembly agree to this recommendation? I see it does. So, the Bureau's recommendation is accepted and the request for a current affairs debate is approved. The debate will be opened by Mr. Emanuelis Zingeris. Then we come to the adoption of the agenda. Our next item of business is the adoption of the agenda to the third part session of the 2021 ordinary session. The draft agenda submitted for the Assembly's approval was drawn up by the Bureau on May 27, 21 and updated on Friday. Maybe a few elements. I do hope that each and every one of you can be in the hemicycle as often and as much as possible. I mean, we got more than 200 members who were inscribed, so you're all welcome to be here. And as it goes, aside from a number of important debates and reports, we also have the event with a high-level panel on Wednesday from 11 to 1, so I would really appreciate all of you to be present. We've got indeed very interesting panel members. We will have an opening by Madame Murat, who is a Nobel Prize winner and a Václav Havel Prize winner. We've got our own Secretary General. We've got the UN Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, Madame Simonovic. We've got my Prime Minister, Mr. De Croo, who wrote a book on it. We've got Madame Moreno, who is the Minister responsible for equality. And we've got the Speaker of the Romanian Parliament. So we got the whole palais, from the executive through the legislative to the holder of the convention to the UN on board. By the way, the person, Madame Simonovic, who is the UN rapporteur, she's also one of the authors of the Istanbul Convention. So the fight against violence against women is extremely important. We put it to the heart of our activity, so I do hope that to the extent of the possible, colleagues would be present in the hemicycle to do so, and of course all colleagues outside too. And I also look to my right to the benches of the ambassadors, so I hope that many of you, and already many of you are here, thank you for that, you will be present also on Wednesday. I also remind you that we have just agreed to hold 2 current affairs debates. It is proposed that the current affairs debate on Belarus takes place on the morning of Wednesday, 23rd of June, and that the current affairs debate on migration takes place on the morning of Thursday, 24th of June, as set out in the agenda. One remark: since the Belarus current affairs debate is just before the event, which has to start at 11, we will hold the debate, if need be, 10 minutes before, and if need be, we will continue afterwards. Because obviously having these 6 persons on board, 4 of them online, I mean, we absolutely need to respect the timing, and we also need a little bit of time before to check technically that everything is going well. I also would like to draw your attention to the revised end time of 8 p.m. for the sitting this afternoon. And finally, in view of the large number of speakers inscribed on the lists of the Bureau, I propose that rapporteurs for report limit their presentation of reports to 7 minutes and 3 minutes to the debate. Is the agenda agreed to? I see that it is agreed to. I have also, if I understand it well, a point of order which is requested by Mr. Kislyak. I will now give the, I don't have this on my screen, so, but okay. Okay, so Mr. Kislyak, if you can ask for the floor, I will give you the floor for a point of order.
Спасибо, господин председатель. Вы знаете, я вынужден взять слово по категории point of order, потому что при том темпе, в котором вы провели голосование, и при той удаленности, на которой мы находимся из Москвы, сигнал с запросом на выступление, видимо, не проходит своевременно. Я хотел выразить полное несогласие с включением пункта повестки дня по Беларуси, тем более в том виде, в котором он сформулирован. Потому что нет никакой угрозы со стороны Белоруссии остальным европейским странам, и это искусственно надуманная формулировка. И уж если говорить о Беларуси, то скорее о вмешательстве внешних сил во внутренние процессы в этой стране, что следовало, может быть, и обсудить. Поэтому наша делегация хотела предложить поставить этот вопрос на голосование. У нас технически не было возможности это сделать, и я должен констатировать это с большим разочарованием. Более того, господин председатель, уже после того, как мы запросили слово по point of order, вы приняли голосование по всей повестке дня, и опять у меня не было возможности высказать то, что мы думаем. Спасибо.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kislyak. Okay, so the Secretary General does confirm that, Mr. Kislyak, you asked for a point of order. I didn't see it, so I do apologize. It is true that the agenda has been adopted now, which puts me in a bit of an awkward situation. I'm looking to my left to the SecGen. Is it appropriate to still have a vote on this request? Is that possible?
Well, because of the technical connection problem, I think we can.
Okay. Well, because of the technical connection problem, I judge it fair that whoever asked indeed for the floor in time should be attended to. So then I'll have to go back to the proposal of the current affairs debate. Just a second. Voila. We heard Mr. Kislyak, who put out his arguments to request not to have the current affairs debate. Is there a colleague in the room who wishes to speak in favor of this Belarus debate? Although it was quite unanimously, if I may say, at least from the people present in the room. No? Well, the Bureau has proposed to have the debate, so Mr. Kislyak requests for a vote. So then we will test our system, which is not bad. So those who are in favor of holding the current affairs debate should vote yes. So if you vote yes, it is in favor of holding the debate. If you vote no, you oppose to holding the debate. The vote is open. And if someone from the technical staff can come to fix my screen here, please. Results, please, which we have to compile from in the room and out of the room. So, we have 68 colleagues in favor, 11 against, and 12 who abstained. Therefore, the current affairs debate is approved. I am not going to go through the whole mechanics again, if you allow me, Madam Secretary General, because it doesn't modify in any instance. Therefore, we now come to our next point on the agenda, which is the progress report of the Bureau and the Standing Committee. As I said in the beginning, I will make use of the assistance, very welcomed assistance of Vice Presidents. In my little list, I had Madame Bakoyannis who would chair the meeting. Is Dora Bakoyannis in the room?
Yes, seat 59.
Okay, so my dear Dora, if you would do me the honor and the pleasure of presiding over the session with a strong hand, as we know you are capable to. And so, yeah, lucky I got my Secretary General because I forgot to adopt the minutes of proceedings, which allows Dora to come up here. So the minutes of the meeting of the Standing Committee in Strasbourg on May 28 have been distributed. I invite the Assembly to take note of these minutes. I mean, you don't have to do anything about it. So the progress report of the Bureau and the Standing Committee is the next point. So I welcome Dora Bakoyannis, Vice President, to take over the meeting. 1 minute, and we will proceed.
Thank you.
Merci, Dora.
So thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the debate on the progress report of the Bureau and Standing Committee, document 153A8 and addendum 123, presented by Mrs. Petra BAYR. Petra. This will be combined with consideration of the report of the ad hoc committee of the Bureau on the observation of the parliamentary elections in Bulgaria, 4th April 2021, document 15292, presented by Mr. Alfred Hare, and the report of the ad hoc committee of the Bureau on the observation of the parliamentary elections in Albania, 25th April 2021, document 15293, presented by Mr. Aleksander. We will interrupt the debate at 1, and it will continue this afternoon at 4 p.m. I call Mrs. BAYR to present the progress report. Petra, you have 7 minutes to present the report.
Thank you very much, Mrs. President. Dear colleagues, this progress report covers the time span from 26th April to 18th of June. And from my point of view, it's really 2 months of concern. The pandemic is not over yet, and the distribution of treatment and care is very uneven globally. Policy of some countries, especially richer European countries, prove that there is priority of profits of pharmaceutical industry over the global health. That's the opposite of solidarity, that's the opposite of responsibility. Within the Council of Europe, we see disputes fueled by hatred. The conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia is not vanished, and the treatment of prisoners of war do not respect international humanitarian law. Also outside the Council of Europe, we witness worrisome developments with direct effects to the Council of Europe member states and Europe. The conflict in the Middle East causes anti-Semitic attacks against Jews and people who are considered to be Jews. And this is a frightening development because it feeds into the already risen anti-Semitism due to corona-related conspiracy and racist othering of people. Also, the last dictatorship in Europe, Belarus, and I do not think that is an artificial problem, is a serious reason for concern. Constant infringement of human rights and the fact that Belarus is not a member of the Human Rights Convention, and so Belarusian citizens do not enjoy the strong protection of the European Court of Human Rights, calls for our solidarity and for our political action to stand with all these brave people in Belarus who still are fighting for their fundamental rights: the right to assemble, the right to free speech, the right to fair elections, democracy, and freedom. And by the way, freedom. Let me also underline the importance of the right to live free from violence. 1 in 3 women and girls at least get once in their lifetime victim of gender-based violence. With the Istanbul Convention, we have an effective legal tool to protect them from violence, from any form of violence. To sign, ratify, and implement the convention is also a parliamentary expression of taking the security and lives of women and girls all over Europe serious, to protect and counsel victims, and to prosecute perpetrators. And the goal is quite clear: to legally condemn and eradicate sexual, physical, psychological, economic, and structural violence against women and girls, not more and not less. As PACE, we will give a clear signal that this is a serious and regretfully still neglected task for us by pledging our parliamentary efforts to strengthen all our activities in combating and eradicating violence against women. At the UN Gender Equality Forum next week, the so-called Generation Equality, where the President of the Parliamentary Assembly will be there and focus on the importance of the ratification and implementation of the content of the Istanbul Convention. And that is a good first step, but it will not be enough. It really also calls for all our activities, for all our efforts to really take the convention serious And I'm very grateful that we will have on Wednesday the chance to have a more detailed debate on this urgent and burning issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. BAYR. Now I call Mr. Alfred Herr to present the observation of the parliamentary elections in Bulgaria on the 4th of April 2021, document 15292. You have 3 minutes. I don't see Mr. Herr. Apparently not. So let me go to the next speaker. I call Mr. Aleksander to present the observation of the parliamentary elections in Albania, 25th of April 2021. Aleksander, you have 3 minutes. Mr. Pociej, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Let me start with congratulations for you to chairing this assembly meeting. It's an honor to see you on this place. On 6 September 2020, the President of Albania called parliamentary elections for 25th April 2021. On 22nd January 2021, the Bureau of the Parliamentary Assembly decided to observe these elections, subject, of course, to the receipt of an invitation to set up an ad hoc committee composed of 20 members, as well as the 2 co-rapporteurs of the Committee of Honoring of Obligation and Commitments. The Assembly ad hoc committee worked in Albania from 21st to 26th of April. The Assembly delegation split into 11 teams and observed the voting process in a number of polling stations in Tirana, the capital, and its surroundings, as well as in Elbasan, Durrës, Kavaje, Diber, Filer, and in the countryside. The Assembly election observation delegation concluded that the parliamentary elections were characterized by a lively and inclusive campaign, thanks to a legal framework that helped ensure respect of fundamental freedoms. At the same time, the campaign saw authorities, like in many other countries, taking advantage of public office. The Assembly observation delegation noted that on election day, in most voting centers visited by members of the delegation, the voting process was overall calm, and the procedure were in general followed. Our delegation noted that parliamentary elections were held following a breakthrough political agreement achieved in June 2020, which was followed by an electoral reform. The Assembly delegation found that in spite of some ambiguities, the legal framework constitutes an adequate basis for conducting democratic elections. The Assembly and the Venice Commission are ready to continue the collaboration with the Albanian authorities to further improve the legal framework and electoral process in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pociej. Chers collègues, je viens d'apprendre que M. Herr est en ligne. Donc, M. Herr, vous avez la parole.
Sorry, I forgot to to press the right button. I want to report to you, Mrs. Vice President, dear colleagues, about our mission in Bulgaria. We found that the elections were held in a proper manner. They were well organized. Of course, we had this pandemic also in Bulgaria, which was a bit difficult to organize it as normal. A limited number of polling stations were opening late. We had some overcrowding in polling stations, but this was mainly due to the pandemic situation and keeping of the distances. Then we had a new thing, the voting by machines that was newly introduced in Bulgaria. This was working well. However, we found that some of the machines were not put so that the secrecy of the vote was guaranteed, but this was not out of bad will. This was something which was now for the first time and which can be corrected. All in all, it was transparent, the voting process. What we saw for as a long-standing problem is, of course, the vote buying, mainly in vulnerable communities. This is still continuing, and this is something we know, and this is also something the Bulgarian authorities know, and this should be improved and should also be prosecuted. For the media environment, it is clear we have the public service broadcasters, and then we have a private media, and this is divided along political lines, and of course is influenced by commercial and corporate interests. But all in all, we have now social media which are run freely, and this gives also the opportunity to new parties to make a proper propaganda for their purposes. The outcome of the results, they were dispersed. The results were like that no government could be installed. This means there will be again a second round of elections on July the 11th, and the Bureau of the Parliamentary Assembly has decided that the same delegation will observe those elections. There was also one small point that was being said, that the ruling party had the favor of the spending money for the COVID-19 pandemic, that this gave them an advantage, but we have to say this is not the Bulgarian problem. I think all ruling parties all over Europe or all over the world must spend money to tackle the pandemic. All in all, we can say it was transparent and it was fair, and there are still a few concerns, but Bulgarian authorities are working with our assembly and also with the Venice Commission, and we want to thank also the Bulgarian authorities for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herr. So let's go to start the debate. We start with the speakers of political groups. First, Mr. SCHENNACH from the Socialists. Mr. SCHENNACH, you have the floor.
Danke sehr, Frau Präsidentin. Zuerst möchte ich allen Berichterstatter, Berichterstatterinnen bedanken für diese Berichte, die wir heute gehört haben. Etwas ist gut, dass unsere Arbeit wieder Schwung aufnimmt, dass wir wieder in so viele Wahlbeobachtungsmissionen gehen. Und Albanien, ich war mit Aleksander in Albanien, hat uns insofern überrascht, indem es wirklich nach all den Problemen, die es vorher gab, ruhig, lebendig war, die Vorschläge der Venice Commission angenommen wurden, was die Wahlrechtsreform betrifft, eine freie Kampagne. Wir haben aber empfohlen, dass man den Vorwurf des Stimmenkaufs und die Selbstzensur der Medien noch genauer anschaut. In dem Zeitraum der Berichterstatterin Petra BAYR hat es selbst ausgeführt, lag auch die heftigen militärischen Auseinandersetzungen mit den vielen, vielen Toten zwischen Israel und Palästina. Was uns besonders Sorgen bereiten muss, ist der verbreitete Antisemitismus, wie wir ihn in Europa zur Kenntnis nehmen mussten und wir dagegen auch tätig werden müssen. Das sind einerseits die Corona-Leugner, die ja zum Teil mit den gelben Sternen herumrennen, zum anderen aber auch Gruppen, die glauben, sie können den Konflikt zwischen Israel und Palästina zu antisemitischen Aktionen hier in Europa nützen. Dem müssen wir entschieden gegentreten. Daniel Hölken, Sonderbeauftragter des Europarats für Antisemitismus und Islamophobie, hat sich gegenüber Österreich sehr kritisch ausgedrückt, indem er gesagt hat, diese Islamlandkarte erzeugt einen Generalverdacht gegenüber Islam und könnte antimuslimische Ressentiments bedienen. So ist es leider auch eingetreten. Ich möchte mich bei Pierre Alain Fredes auch sehr herzlich bedanken für seine Fact-Finding-Mission auf die griechischen Inseln. Das war, glaube ich, sehr wichtig. Sehr begrüßenswert ist auch die Wahl im Kosovo. Es ist eine riesig große neue Chance für dieses Land und wir haben ja auch jetzt eine neue Delegation hier bei uns. In Armenien ist gestern die Wahl gewesen, in Moldawien waren wir bereits mit einer Pre-Electoral Mission. Auch das sieht gut aus. Und ich denke, hier kommen wir wiederum in Bereiche zurück, in der man sieht, was losgeht. Und als Generalrapporteur für Medienfreiheit möchte ich noch einmal allen bedanken, die sich hier in der Sache Belarus aktiv gezeigt haben, sodass wir nicht aufhören, für die Freilassung von Raman Pradasevic und seiner Freundin Sofia Sapege zu kämpfen. Danke sehr.
Vielen Dank, Herr Schenner. Mr. POCIEJ, on behalf of the EPP. You have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. I agree totally with Stefan. Speaking about Albania, we were really surprised how this country changed over a few last years. And I must also say that those parliamentary elections were generally very well organized by the administration. And we must also agree that in Bulgaria, for example, everybody was saying that this is very important elections which are going to change the country. The political verdict in Bulgaria, the public opinion is so split that we are going to participate in few weeks in the new election in Bulgaria. In Armenia, very important, and I must agree that the government and the majority took very courageous decision. They had majority, but they went to the anticipated elections, and this is a sign of democratic orientation of the Armenian leaders. I cannot say more than Petra said about the troubles, the danger in Belarus. As somebody coming from Poland, I remember when we were revolting against against communism and against dictature in our country in the 80s. And I remember when everybody on TV, our leaders were saying that we are working for the foreign forces. And I'm sure the same is in Belarus. The people, they want the changes, and they deserve the changes. And I'm very glad that we have this debate during our parliamentary session, because it's very important for those people to send the signal that we are with them and they can count on us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. POCIEJ. On behalf of the ALDE group, Mr. KRAVCHUK, Mrs. KRAVCHUK from Ukraine.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, first of all, I'd like to congratulate all three rapporteurs, Petra, BAYR, Alfred here, and Aleksander POCIEJ, and also our other colleagues who contributed to the very impressive work on the progress report. I'd like to touch upon a few topics. Firstly, in early April, I had an opportunity to be a part of the election observation mission of Bulgaria. One of my takeaways was the exercise of the voting machines tested by 25% of voters and proved their efficiency, overall efficiency in the digitalization period. The results of the election brought several political forces to search the compromise in forming the coalition while they failed, and what ended up in the appointment of the early elections on 11th of July. This looks like the evidence of the democratic process in the parliament and proper exercise of his rights by the president. But also I have the impression that Bulgarian society is tired of the pandemic restrictions and political processes that accompany them. Secondly, I have to pay the attention on the ongoing debates on the Istanbul Convention. I'd like to congratulate our Liechtenstein colleagues on the recent ratification of the convention, and I have to assure the Assembly members that the process of ratification and implementation of the convention is being followed closely by many institutions from their respective spheres of expertise. In particular, a few days ago, the ALDE group, which I represent, conducted extended discussion on the monitoring of the ratification and the implementation of the Istanbul Convention. Thirdly, I have to mention that the ALDE has also started group reflection and the work on the link between the human rights and the environment. And last but not the least, I want to underline the importance of the topics brought up for the current affairs debates in the relation of the situation in Belarus and the need for the relief of the migratory pressure on the frontline countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. For the ECDA, Mr. SEYIDOV.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And on behalf of the EC group, I am delighted that our group has become again the third largest group in the Assembly. And from this point of view, I think very important to take into account that our group is always in favor of balanced approach and objective approach to all matters, to all questions which we already discussed or we are going to discuss. As I understand, the progress report is the major report which should reflect the major events which had happened since last session. And since last session, we saw that very important event had happened between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Agreement reached 12th on June in exchange of providing Azerbaijan with maps of 97,000 anti-tank and anti-personnel mines in the Agdam region, which just recently liberated. And 15 detainers, Madam Rapporteur, Armenians, were handed over to Armenia under the auspices of United States of America, Georgia, and European institutions. And it's really very strange that these very crucial development which we have didn't reflect in your report. At the same time, you have mentioned about detainees in Azerbaijan. It's really very strange that you said that they treated not in line of international law. How get this information? All international organizations, and especially Red Cross, already make statements about that. And that's why, on behalf of the group, I ask my colleagues to think about this bell, which President returned back to us. This is our core values, and we shouldn't use democracy, rule of law, right to speech, in order to present someone in not right way, in not good way. I think we return back to our values. We should think that much more important to unite people, to think about reconciliation between Azerbaijan and Armenia, to think about steps which Council of Europe can do together. And I am, as a representative of my group, fully in favor of these kind of steps, but not to present only one side position, only one lateral information, and not create the real picture of the events. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seyidov. Last but not least, from the political groups, Mr. Tini Cox from the UL.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and great to see you in the chair. When Petra started her intervention, we had a full-fledged female rostrum after the first intervention of a female rapporteur. So there is still hope for this assembly in the future, and I wish Nicole Tries with her report on more gender balance in this organization well. Let me start to thank the rapporteur for her work, but also the rapporteurs on the election observation, Mrs. Rapporteur and Aleksander, because it shows that we are working, we are functioning. Election observation is an important part of our work, and the other things that were mentioned by Petra BAYR reflect that we are recovering, as the whole continent is beginning to recover from COVID-19. The presence of so many colleagues here shows that we are recovering. That is important, and we should be proud on all those who made that possible, those who worked in the healthcare, those who worked in the administrations, the governments, who, some quicker, some slower, but in the end managed to deal with this huge challenge to all our societies. It showed also that we are united, because when we are attacked by a virus that has no plans but is nevertheless deadly and has so much influence for our society, that then we can cooperate. So compliments for that. But Madam President, at the same time, when we are recovering from COVID-19, there is a new virus that is attacking us. And that virus was mentioned in the report of the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, in the report that she presented to the Committee of Ministers in May in Hamburg, and that has the title Democracy in Distress. And we know our Secretary General is not a woman of big words. So if she says that democracy overall in the continent is in distress, we should take that warning very serious. This virus affects the democratic structures from the north to the south and from the east to the west in our continent. It makes the rule of law functioning less. It makes protection of human rights less. It makes the democracy of which we all should be so proud and which is the pillar under our organization is functioning less. So I hope that we will be able, after we are recovering and while we are recovering from the COVID-19 virus, we as politicians, we would be able to also deal with this challenge. Because if democracy in Europe is in distress, it is our responsibility. We cannot put the blames to others. We are the elected politicians. We are the ones who should take care that we fulfill the commitments under the Statute of the Council of Europe, under the European Convention of Human Rights and the European Social Charter. So let us congratulate ourselves, Madam President, that we are able to recover from COVID. Let us now commit ourselves to that we will recover from this attack on the democracy and the rule of law in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Now I go to the list of speakers, and we start with Mr. Avetissian from Armenia.
Madam President, thank you very much. And I also want to thank my colleagues, Ms. Petra and Aleksander for noting Armenia's elections. In a rather difficult period, my people were able to wisely go to the elections and choose the government. I'm glad that in Armenia democracy has won and that we remained on a democratic path even after all of these hardships that were caused by the aggression of Azerbaijan against Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. What I also want to thank you for is the discussion of Armenian POVs that we had in April. This is an important base that helped us to kind of have an international pressure and also dialogue with Azerbaijan to release the Armenian detainees. And I hope that this work will be kept on. This is perhaps one of the last times I'm speaking in this hemicycle, but I am sure that you have those values to continue this conversation, this pressure, because that's something that helps. That's the necessity that we continue asking to have these people returned. What Mr. Seyidov rightly mentioned was the international mediation, which was very important. What he also but forgot to mention are two things. In the progress report, it should be noted that in May 12, for example, Azerbaijani forces encroached on the sovereign territory of Armenia. All the international observers, including the OSCE Minsk group chairs such as Russia, US, and France, called on withdrawing the Azerbaijani forces, but they haven't. They still remain there. That doesn't help to the peace. That doesn't help to understanding of the territorial integrity that we have spoken so much about. Another important issue that I want to mention, the POVs or existence of detainees in Azerbaijan has been denied for a long time. Now we see that they are detainees. And in fact, in a recent, rather provocative action, when Erdogan and Aliyev were visiting the occupied Shushi of Artsakh, they basically converse about these detainees like these are some kind of, gambling chips. And there's a conversation about that, and my colleagues will speak more about it. I really want us to remain humans, and I really want us to have this humanitarian issue sorted out as fast as possible, because that will help the region to gain some confidence in the peace and prosperity that shall come probably. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Avetissian, and may I, on behalf of our colleagues and all of us here, wish you a happy birthday. Now, Mrs. Andrikine has the floor. She has to ask for the floor. Mrs. Andrikine, please ask for the floor. Je la vois pas. Elle est ici? No?
Hello, yes, I can
yes,
you.
she is online. Wonderful, yes, I can see you now.
Madam President, I was a member of the PACE ad hoc committee to observe parliamentary elections in Albania. I fully support the report presented by head of our delegation, Aleksander. And in addition to what has been said by him, very few remarks. Firstly, the decision to send PACE election observation delegation to Albania was really a right decision, even in the situation of COVID-19 pandemic. I was observing elections in Tirana and its surroundings. It was clear from the reactions we saw that our presence there was well received, appreciated, and really important. Secondly, the 140-member parliament was elected for a 4-year term through a regional proportional system. Candidates were elected from 12 multi-seat electoral districts. While foreseen as a possibility in the electoral code, no out-of-country voting was offered. to citizens. So do not be surprised by the turnout, 46.32%. Voters residing abroad could, however, return and vote. It is important to have this in mind because in case of Albania, more citizens live abroad than in Albania itself. Sadly, for the first time, an electronic voter identification system was installed in all voting centers on election day to mitigate the risk of double voting, family voting, etc. Additionally, the device scans fingerprint, which may be used as evidence in possible complaints. So elections were generally well organized by the election administration, which at all levels overall enjoyed the trust of stakeholders. When it comes to the shortcomings, of course, there were some. And for instance, one of them was so-called misuse of administrative resources. When, for instance, ministers continued with official engagements throughout the campaign until the very last day, wearing face masks or T-shirts with their political party's ballot number. Another important fact should be mentioned that only one print online media outlet and 10 out of over 100 private TV and radio stations, in line with the law, submitted their price list for campaign advertisements to the Central Electoral Commission. Thus, transparency of advertisement conditions was limited. Nevertheless, it is undeniable that a remarkable progress has been made in Albania, and it be really observed democratic elections with international standards implemented. Congratulations to Albania. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jafarov, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you very much, Madam President. Nothing bloomed in Karabakh for 30 years. Armenians destroyed everything, every single building, including 3,000 religious and cultural monuments. All foreign visitors witnessed this unprecedented barbarism. But look at the Karabakh now. It has become center for rising prosperity, destiny of hope, for millions of Azerbaijani IDPs. Billions of euros were invested in the great reconstruction of the Karabakh. Foreign businesses from United States, Italy, Israel, Turkey, UK had already started to operate in different development phases of the Karabakh. Master plan of the city of Aghdam, which is referred as a Hiroshima of 21st century, just recently approved. And Shusha, from the roads from Fizuli to Shusha, the Victory Road, and also roads from Fizuli to Jabrayil, Hadrut, are under construction. International airports are being built in the cities of Fizuli, Zengilan, and Lachin. The President Aliyev personally laid down the foundation stone of the smart village in Aghali, Zengilan. This innovative project is one of the most effective tools in achieving sustainable development goals of the United Nations. But you should know that we are rebuilding the Karabakh from scratch. You should know that the size of the liberated territories are the 4 times of Luxembourg. Once Pamahali Khan built the Karabakh, surely we will do again. But the main challenge is that mines. Recently, with the mediation of the United States and of Georgia, we successfully exchanged 15 detained Armenians with a 97,000 mines map of Aghdam. If you remember in the very last session, here, Armenian delegation and authorities refused the existence of such kind of maps. Just a few weeks ago, these mines killed 2 journalists and 1 civil servant in KRAVCHUK. This is the war crime. This is the violation of trilateral statement. This is the violation of international humanitarian laws. And therefore, we should all together put pressure on Armenia to hand over the mind maps in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Husseinov, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, the last 2 years will be a difficult test in the history of the Council of Europe, as well as in the life of the whole world. Now, when we think about the next progress report, it is the fact that the Council of Europe is successfully passing this test. It did not lose its balance, quickly adapted to the conditions of the pandemic period, and even at this historical stage, gained new experience to more effectively build its activities in the future. I say all this now because our topic is progress from that part session to this one. And at each new part session, we see more and more progress in terms of organizing our work. In the post-pandemic future, it may be appropriate to hold intersessional meetings of certain committees, especially those that discuss sensitive report and organize important votings in a hybrid format. Development is a progress process that needs to be learned not only from good, but also from bad and unpleasant experiences. And I would like to draw your attention to one point, recalling the discussion during the reporting period. One of the main goals of the Council of Europe is to be a judge, to work towards fairness and objectivity in decisions and opinions, and to always maintain a balance. Unfortunately, however, these important conditions are not always respected, and any such exclusion causes dissatisfaction as well as insufficiently balanced behavior, and words of individuals damage the reputation of our organization. At the end of the last session, questions were traditionally posed to the acting chairman of the Committee of Ministers, Mr. Mikhail Rut. I asked one of these questions, and the answer was so biased, so far from the approach and statements of the Council of Europe, that it could not help but surprise. I noted that the liberated territories of Azerbaijan were completely mined, and that more than 100 people were killed by mines, and asked how the Council of Europe Committee of Ministers could influence Armenia within its mandate to provide maps of mined areas. Having joined the meeting from his office, Mr. Roth postponed the question and began to accuse Azerbaijan in the comprehensible stubbornness. What was the outcome? Less than a month, Azerbaijani journalists were blown up by a mine in these areas, as a result of which 2 were killed and several wounded. Such irresponsible, unfair, and dubious statements trying to justify injustice from such high positions each time led to new tragedies. Therefore, the ability to maintain balance in every word and action rather than weighing the scales can be the healthiest foundation for our future development. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nemeth, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dora. Dear colleagues, the Hungarian presidency has started, along with the European Football Championship. The Hungarian public has to divide its attention between the Hungarian presidency and the European Championship. As you all know, the Standing Committee and the Bureau had a kind of semi-hybrid meeting in Budapest. Our President and our Secretary General visited Budapest. Plenty of events are coming up. Our priorities, the Hungarian Foreign Minister will introduce them in the afternoon. National minorities, interreligious dialogue, future generations, digitalization and environmental matters, and human rights. I would draw your attention that we have published a booklet. It is available to everybody. I would like to draw your attention, colleagues, for the exhibition in front of the hemicycle on the Hungarian Parliament building and the development of our constitutional history. It is a really nice exhibition, right to me. And obviously the cooperation between the German outgoing and the incoming Italian presidency is good, as it should be in the match tomorrow with Germany evening for Hungary. Secondly, the future of Europe issue I would like to touch upon. The conference has started last Saturday here in Strasbourg, and I would like to welcome the process. And we have to make clear, however, that Europe is not the European Union. The 27 states are just some half of the 50 countries of Europe. The Council of Europe cannot be sidelined, and we should find the appropriate modalities to get involved in this process. The Western Balkan countries are finally invited into the Future of Europe conference. I think it's a good step in the right direction. And finally, about Belarus. The current affairs debate is very important. I share the views of Mr. POCIEJ on this subject. The downing of the flight was beyond imagination, and I think we have to condemn unequivocally this surrealistic breach of European norms. And similarly, we have to condemn the intimidation of the Polish minority, which is happening continuously, and step up for human and minority rights of the Polish community. An inclusive dialogue, yes, it is important, and I believe that the Council of Europe will play an important role in this. We want Belarus back here in the family of the European nations, but it is possible if basic principles are respected. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Nemeth. I wish you every success, both for the presidency and for the football, without taking, of course, any part. May I go to the next speaker? And the next speaker is Mr. Antonio Guterres.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta. Queridos colegas, el Consejo de la Unión Europea decidió la apertura de negociaciones de adhesión con Albania y Macedonia del Norte en mayo de 2020, es decir, hace más de un año. He formado parte de la misión de observación de esta Asamblea Parlamentaria en las elecciones legislativas del 25 de abril. Sin duda ha habido deficiencia, tal como refleja nuestro informe, y así lo ha señalado también el presidente de la delegación, Aleksander. Pero estas elecciones han representado un salto cualitativo democrático en Albania, de tal forma que las reformas electorales puestas en marcha han demostrado haber contribuido a un resurgir de la confianza democrática en el país. Albania ha llevado a cabo las reformas que desde la Unión Europea se le habían pedido para la apertura formal de las negociaciones. Reformas relativas al Estado de Derecho, reforma judicial, reforma del sistema electoral. Por supuesto, queda mucho por hacer, pero debemos recordar que la convocatoria de la primera conferencia intergubernamental y la apertura formal de las negociaciones de adhesión son solo el inicio de un camino, en ningún caso el final de un proceso. Habrá que seguir convergiendo en Estado de Derecho, en derechos y libertades, pero también en agricultura, en energía, en transporte, en estándares laborales o en sostenibilidad. Queridos colegas, los Balcanes occidentales son de un interés estratégico de la Unión Europea. ¿Cuántas veces la inestabilidad de la región ha conllevado la inestabilidad de todo el continente? Albania y Macedonia del Norte son además un factor de estabilidad en la misma, que promueve relaciones de buena vecindad con todos los países con los que tiene fronteras. Por todo ello, urge no demorar más la apertura formal de las negociaciones de adhesión. Urge la convocatoria de la primera conferencia intergubernamental con Albania y Macedonia del Norte. Urge que el Consejo de la Unión Europea cumpla con lo prometido hace más de un año. Y la Asamblea Parlamentaria del Consejo de Europa debe ayudar y apoyar para que así sea. Ellos nos necesitan, pero también nosotros los necesitamos. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. The last speaker for this session is Mrs. Hairapetian.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, as colleagues mentioned before, and also my Armenian colleague Mr. Avedisian said, Armenia has chosen the path of democracy, and this is the fact. Whatever it means for any of us, but it's important that only our people can choose how to get out from the crisis in our country. Now I want to get back to the issue of prisoners of war, and for your attention, I want to bring literally the conversation which took place maybe a week ago between Ilham Aliyev and the wife of Erdogan, Emine Khanum. So on their way to occupied Shushi, she asks Mr. Aliyev, are there many Armenian prisoners of war in Baku? And he happily says, yes, yes, there are so many prisoners of war. And she says, laughing, oh, so good, so return them in small portions. This is literally what they say. The video is there on YouTube, you can see this. And the countries, Azerbaijan and Turkey, are in this, are members of Council of Europe, and the leaders behave like that. This is not only contradicts the logic of international law, but this is insane, this is inhuman. And every time we come here, the families of the prisoners of war ask us what Europe is doing, what you are doing while you go there. We say, you know, they discuss it, they judge, they condemn, and as a result, we have very little portions of prisoners of war. And there are so many people, hundreds of people, and the families are suffering. It has been more than half a year. The ceasefire statement was signed. And Armenia done its part of the deal. It's Azerbaijan which refuses. And they say, you know, we returned 15 prisoners of war. Oh, thank you very much. But I want to remind you that it's your duty to immediately return all the prisoners of war, which you have to do according to the November 9th ceasefire statement. And I want to say that peace is not simply a beautiful word. We value peace more than anyone in the world because we know how it is to be in war, how it is to lose the beloved ones. But peace means actions. Peace means hard work. And Azerbaijani way of peace is to entering the sovereign territory of Armenia, is to keeping Armenian prisoners of war as hostages, it's to dehumanizing Armenian people on the state level, and then come to this hemicycle and beautifully talk about peace. Dear Azerbaijani colleagues, if you really want peace, go back to your home country and make your dictator Aliyev to act in accordance to international law, return back Armenian prisoners of war, and get out from Armenian sovereign territory. We don't want war. No one wants war. But if you want peace, you need to act. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I have to close the list now. Mr. Bushati, you will be the first speaker this afternoon at 4 o'clock. And before I close it completely, I would like to say happy birthday also to Mr. Badea, Mrs. Martinez Ferro, and Mrs. Tasovak. Happy birthday to all of you. And thank you very much. See you this afternoon at 4 o'clock. Live on.